Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So you spoke earlier today on a panel about the partnerships and the rivalries in the region. What can you tell our viewers a little bit more about that?
That's a huge issue. We see the changes of alliances in the region, sometimes every 40 years, but sometimes every 4 years or 2 years. And what we see now is a shaping of the structure of what we saw several years ago. We saw, for instance, Iran and Turkey. Iran and Turkey were good friends. Even Turkey was one of the ways to circumvent sanctions against Iran. And then started the civil war in Syria, and Turkey was against Bashar Assad and was supporting the Muslim Brotherhood and other organizations that were fighting against Bashar Assad. And of course, the relations between Iran, that was supporting Bashar Assad, and Turkey, that was against him, deteriorated. Now we see, again, a flip-flop, as we say, immediately the situation on the ground has changed. And following that, also the relations between Iran and Turkey, because Turkey understood that they have to be part of the arrangement that will come one day after the fight is finished, the fightings are finished, and they swift to better relations with the Russians on one hand and with Iran on the other hand. The same goes for Saudi Arabia and Turkey. They had good relations when Turkey was against Iran and against Bashar Assad. They are now not in animosity at all, but in less good relations than were before because of Turkey supporting Iran in Syria and Turkey supporting Qatar in the crisis between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. So what we see is a lot of changes of alliances. You also see it, of course, with Israel, Turkey with Israel. Once we had great relations, then we saw what happened with the Marmara, etc. And not to speak about Iran, Saudi Arabia, the peak of the crisis. I don't know if there is more peaks that can be reached on one hand. With Israel, the same. We had wonderful relations with Iran during the Shah period, and immediately it changed when Khomeini came to power and the revolution. So the Middle East is sometimes in changes that take years, many years, decades, and sometimes it takes months or 1-2 years.
And you touched on Turkey for a moment, and I just want to bring that back to the Israel-Turkey relationship, or lack thereof. I mean, Israel and Turkey used to have military drills together, which we don't see right now, and will likely not see in the near future. What can you touch on more about that?
As you mentioned, we had very close relations before Erdogan came to power. A lot of military cooperation, intelligence cooperation, not to talk about the economic cooperation. And with the rise of Erdogan to power, which is many years, I think it's 12, 13 years, we saw a slight decline of relations. And the peak of it was in the Marmara, with the Marmara event. And the break of relations, diplomatic relations. But it's interesting to see that even though the diplomatic relations were on low level and the animosity and the public animosity was very high, still trade relations and economy continued, because Erdogan understands that he was elected with the slogan of improving the economy in Turkey. It's very important for him. And he understood that Israel is an important partner. So even in the lowest point of time of the relations, of the bilateral relations, trade and economy continued, but of course it discouraged people to go to there. Now we see, on one hand, he continues to blame Israel for everything and continues to talk about Israel in a very harsh way. At the same time, economic relations continue, and even the threat to again deteriorate the diplomatic relations after the announcement of Trump on Jerusalem did not happen. So he made some public appearances very harsh against Trump and against Israel. Also convened the Muslim countries conference in Istanbul. But at the end of the day, I don't see any huge improvement that will happen during the time of Erdogan. At the same time, I don't think that he will go back to the very low level of breaking diplomatic relations as it was before.
And if I can move us to the southern part of the country, in Egypt. Egypt under Sisi has been very pro-Israel. There's been a lot of cooperation in various ways. But right now, Egypt is going towards elections. There's not really anyone who is up against Sisi. But do you think that there is a chance for Egypt to go back into the relations we had under Morsi, which was probably at the lowest point that we had since we signed the peace treaty?
First of all, I'll say a word about your last sentence. It was low, but it wasn't the lowest. And even Morsi understood that the peace agreement is a mutual interest of Egypt and Israel, and even he didn't touch it and didn't say that he's going to touch it. So I think the peace between Israel and Egypt is very established, is important for both countries, and I don't see a huge change. What I do think is that always it depends, of course, on the president on the Egyptian side. Sisi has very good relations with Israel. I don't see any change in the future. He benefits a lot from the cooperation on the fight against terror, against ISIS. So I don't see any reason for a change, and I believe that also after elections, relations will continue to be good. Of course, one has to remember those good relations are not in all the spheres of two countries. Not a full normalization between the two countries. There is no enough economic relations, no enough cultural, not at all cultural relations. Tourism is not flowing on both sides. So there is a lot to be improved, but still there is a mutually strategic interest and it works.
Thank you so much.